right, now hold on. Second question, guys. That was arguably that was just one. So,
I'm going to say it was one.
So runes, I mean, we saw on the demo this morning, they look fantastic, but when are we actually going to get to play them? Because if they're not in the beta, at what point will they come in that the average guy's going to get to see them?
What point will
runes be either imported into? I mean, I assume the beta is going to be more than just the first act at some point. Will they come in?
It likely won't be more than the first act.
Okay. I guess my question is, when will the player get runes in the game? Period. Is it second, third act?
Okay. I wasn't sure whether you were talking about like chronologically. When do I get to play? I'm like, well, when the game ships.
That's what I thought.
It's
looking for a date.
Okay.
They show up in Act 2.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we won't have.
There is some interesting stuff about the rune system that I would love to talk to you guys about.
I'll do it
if someone asks me a question about it.
Oh, jeez.
What would you like to tell us about the rune?
There it goes.
So one of the things that the rune system is probably the only major system that still has a significant enough kind of revision to it coming. So all the content that's currently in is not going anywhere. Like the way you alter the skills and the types of runes and all those things. That's all basically staying the same. But one of the things that we found, and you guys haven't gotten a chance to play with it, unfortunately, but one of the things that we found is when you take a rune and you look at it, we have this monster new tooltip we added. And so you look at the rune and you get like, this is what it can do in all 6 skills I currently have equipped. It's a nightmare point of comparison. Like it feels really bad after a while, and it was one of the things with the internal alpha that we got feedback on that we tried to address. And so we also kind of like the idea of runes are not items in the true Diablo sense of what an item is. And by the way, this is all theory. We haven't put this in yet, so this is the way we think we're going to go, but it's not solidified. So keep that in mind, and when you report on it, make sure you say this is theory. But I feel like it's theory worth sharing with especially the fan community. What I mean by they're not items in the traditional sense is they don't really have this kind of long tail and scaling. There's not randomness to them. A rank 7 indigo rune is a rank 7 indigo rune. It doesn't have a better or worse version of it. There's also runes are kind of this awesome way for us to add a little bit more investment into the skills that you've chosen. So what we're thinking about doing is essentially having runes drop kind of unaligned, or we call them unattuned, in which case they're kind of gray and generic. They don't actually have a type. And then you pop them into a skill. And when you do that, the rune attunes to that skill. You can still remove the rune freely whenever you want, but now that rune is not an indigo rune, it is a magic missile splitting rune. And on top of having the magic missile splitting attributes, it also might give you a couple other affixes like plus 10 attack or something like that. And the reason that we're talking about doing that is, one, with the ability to kind of switch skills out, it would be nice to have a soft mechanism that does make you want to focus on what skills that you want to focus on. When you have a rune that only has one effect on one skill, the point of comparison becomes a lot easier. And it really adds in the item game. It means that there's really valuable rank 7 runes and okay rank 7 runes. And that's something that we'd really like to see, because it plays into how we want the item game in Diablo to play.
So you're saying that for example, any rank 7 rune would fit any class's specific skills, or you're saying it would just fit one specific skill?
It would say when it dropped, it would fit nothing. Could be put anywhere.
Oh, okay.
But once you put it, little magic happens, and that was the official magic term by now. And that's the actual sound effect.
That's good.
At that point, it transforms into magic missile rune or whatever skill that you put it into. At that point, it's locked forever. So that kind of a lock choice we like, because it's one that you can make over and over again. It's one that, if you didn't get if you didn't get something you want, that's not that dissimilar to an item dropping that you didn't want. And so I think that feels a lot better than, say, I made this permanent choice that I can never unmake. And so it felt like it was a really kind of different idea. We haven't tried it out yet, so it might suck. So I'm going to put that caveat out there. But those are the one thing we still want to try with that system. And if it works, then we'll keep it. If it doesn't, then the system works pretty good as it is.
Well, from what I saw this morning, and it was, it's hard to understand exactly what we were seeing, but the arcane blast or whatever the pink ball was, you used a rune to turn that into something that swirled around and protected your character.
Yep.
My understanding was that the runes have different effects, and based upon, you take that effect, and that actual effect would apply itself to any ability that was applicable.
Well, that was one of the things that didn't So the reason why we created the classifications of runes was actually to solve an inventory issue. If we had a rune for every effect on every skill, plus every rank, that's 3,500 different items. Too many items to dump on the player. So we were like, well, we need to come up with a solution for that. So we said, well, let's do classifications. But the classifications need to be loose because we want to be able to look at every skill and decide at the skill what we want to change. We don't want to create these hard-locked classifications like, for example, this rune always turns everything into an armor protecting ability. Well, that would be the kind of hard classification that could be understood, but how do you use that with every single skill? And what we'd come into is we'd get into these situations where, okay, well, what would we do with electrocute? Well, we'd probably turn it into storm armor, but we already have storm armor. So, and hey, we actually want to do something completely different with electrocute. So we created these classifications as really loose classifications. So we say like a crimson rune is damage. But what does a crimson rune do when you put it in a buff? Well, sometimes we figure out how to make it increase damage, and sometimes we go, you know what? We don't have a good damage idea for this skill, so we're going to have to do something different. But the problem is that created a lot of confusion. People wanted to know, what's a crimson rune? Because they had this crimson rune, and they had to figure out what skills to put it in, and it did something different in every skill. And wow, that's a lot. That's really overwhelming. Can't you guys just make it so that it always kind of does the same thing? I'm like, well, if we did, we actually think that the system would kind of suck because you wouldn't get these kind of wildly variant effects in different skills, and that's what we want. So our inventory solution didn't really match with our goal for the system, and that's why we're considering this change.
How would making the runes random solve that problem, though? Because I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I mean, if you still go with the 5 potential, or I think it's 5, Crimson, Indigo, whatever.
Yep.
So if you go with the 5 potential random sets of whatever that can change the spells, how would that make it so that people always know what everything is? Because if I'm sitting here, a new player, and I get this rune and I pop it in and I say, okay, cool, now it just made my magic missiles hit different enemies or whatever, how would I know what I could potentially get with each new rune? And what if I get the same thing twice? And
well, so part of it is, to some degree you don't know, and that's could be a potential downside, but this could be an upside that it's fun to experiment. We do expect rune drops to be, especially in the early game, frequent enough that you don't mind experimenting. In the later game, rune drops become more precious, but that's the point where you kind of already understand the system, and that's like higher rank runes. The reason why we feel it will solve a lot of inventory issues is, one, quality of the rune will have a big effect. If you get a rune that is lower quality than the one you already have, you'll tend to toss it out like you would an item. And so that's one factor. The other one is that because runes are more of a resource now, you're not going to generally pop them into skills that you don't want to use. So you're going to tend to focus on your core set of abilities.
How would you know that you don't want to use it if you don't know what it does? If it's random as soon as you put it in, how do you know you don't want to use it?
Well, I'd say you more know ahead of time if you are playing a wizard and you don't like electricity. You're probably not going to waste runes on electrocute. Okay. So it is. You could make the argument that if I knew what electrocute could really do, maybe I would. Because I think there's a small percentage of players who will feel that way, and unfortunately, that's what the internet's for. Yes. And I know earlier I said, isn't it awesome that the system doesn't use the internet? Now we're going to make this other system that makes you use the internet. But right. I actually think it is a very small percentage of players who will want to obsessively know what every rune does ahead of time before they ever make a decision in it.
Well, if I could possibly make a build without screwing up, like you said in Diablo 2, people would. I usually just wait until I hit level 80 and then dump all my points in because I know that's what I can do. So I mean, if I have to be careful with where I spend my runes, I'm not going to want to spend them as much.
But the thing is, you're not going to need to be careful with rank 1 runes. And rank 1 runes will give you an idea of what a rank 7 rune will do.
That actually leads into my next question. What is the difference between the level of rankings? Is it like damage and stuff like that, or is it like maybe it's instead of the twister spell, it's a bigger twister, or it does more damage as a twister? What's
So the basic effect doesn't change. The effect will scale, or the math within it will scale. So I give you an example. I'll give you 2 examples. So magic missile, you put an indigo rank 1 rune in it, and it splits and fires off 2 missiles. You put a rank 7, it splits and fires 8.
okay?
You take, I forget, I think it's the obsidian rune, that if you put it in energy twister, you notice all my examples are wizard, you can tell what class I am. I think it's obsidian that actually will cause 2 tornadoes that hit to combine into a bigger, higher damage tornado. So that one, the tornado does even more damage.
Okay.
So every rune effect has some element of it that scales. But the basic idea of what it doesn't change with ranks. It just gets more powerful. So you can experiment. Rank 1 runes are like candy. You can just throw them out and experiment all you want to figure out the exact runes you like before you start investing in the rank 7s. Micah has a question.
Oh, I was just going to say also maybe a good point for that is once you use a rune and if rank 1s are like candy, you can recycle those in various ways or just put them on the auction house.
Yeah. Well, the auction house, and then we are actually talking about rune recycling mechanics. Like for example, we may allow you to, and it's because we haven't implemented the system yet, we don't know what supports we need for it. So for example, one of the things we might need is take it to the mystic and pay her a cost and wipe the effect on the rune.
That'd be cool.
In which case you can get it back. So if the system feels like it needs things like that, we'll have
That
it.
kind of solves the problem that I was talking about before.
Yeah.
I mean, how do I know that I don't want to use that?
And the thing is, that might be a real problem, but it might not. And so we kind of want to get it in the game and see if it is. And if it is, then we kind of already have some backup solutions. Like that's one. We've also talked about runes being maybe producing really useful crafting materials. So that, when you're done with it, okay, I didn't get what I wanted, oh well, but I still get something awesome from it.
Yeah.
The notion that you just take runes and after you attune them, if they have no value, that's not really,
Right.
that's probably not going to be cool.
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee that ain't going to work. But what solution? Sometimes it's really important to us not to pre-solve a problem. We don't know exactly how new ideas are going to work. Sometimes they work exactly the way we think, and sometimes they don't. So we try not to spend too much time. If we've got 2 or 3 ideas about how we'd solve the problem, good enough. We move forward, we put it in, we see if the problem's real, then we solve it.
So, once they're attuned, you can then swap them out, and you can sell them. You're saying.
Yep.
So, in theory, you could make a perfect build from the if you do use the internet and you just buy the runes that you want from the auction house.
Yep. You could make a really awesome build if you invest a lot of money in the trading process.
And you're also saying that the possibility, in theory, once you attune it, it can give it unique affixes that might further change the rune. Is that?
Well, not change the rune, but actually, it almost would act. They'd act a little bit like charms in a way.
Charms in a
Where
skill, right?
So
When
like
they're
extra
when they're
power or something.
when they're socketed, then you get a little bit. You get like a stat boost of some kind.
Gotcha.
So they work very much like wearable items.
That'd be interesting.
If it works. Fingers crossed. The nice thing is, system's already cool. So if it doesn't work, we'll probably just leave it the way it is.